can stay all over the place, it's fine. I'm just going to start the tour over here. Welcome to Calem. My name is Rafael. During the tour, I'm just going to explain what it is Portwine, all the different types of Portwine that we produce, and as well the history of the cellar. To start with the history, Calem, it's the name of the cellar. And it's because our founder, the name, it was Antonio Alves Calem. So Calem was the name of the Portuguese family that established the cellar here in 1859. But the family that were here to run the business until 1998. Because on the early 2000, they decided to sell the cellar to our company. And at the moment we have a Spanish company called Soja Vinos. Our company, it is basically a group of 5 different cellars. They have a group of 5 different brands of port wine. They don't have only Calem, but they have other brands like Burmaster, Kopke, Barros, and Gilbert's. And all these 5 cellars, they don't produce only port wine, but they can also produce table wines. And the whole wine production starts in the Douro Valley. So the region is located right over here in the northern Portugal. It's 120 kilometers from here, from the city, until the border with Spain. And over there, we have a total area of 250,000 hectares in the Douro Valley. Our company in the Douro Valley, they have 40,000 hectares just for our own production, because they have also 4 different vineyards, 1 winemaking center, and in our space there's exactly a variety of 116 types of grapes. Because also nowadays it doesn't exist a port wine produced with a single grape, so they are all a blend of different grapes. Because we don't produce only blended port wines, we also have the single harvest productions. And the whole production of the wine depends mostly of the weather. The Douro Valley region, it is a region with extreme temperatures all over the year. So most part of the year it's cold and rainy, but during the summer we also have temperatures over 40 degrees. So we usually say that the Douro Valley has 9 months of winter and 3 months of hell. Because that's it, so it's extreme temperatures all over the year, always very different every year, because we don't produce every year the same wine, so the whole production depends mostly of the weather. Usually the production starts after the summer. It's September, October, the harvest. Then we do all the stumping of the grapes. And after all the stumping, we have the fermentation. The biggest difference between all the wines that we have is just the fermentation, because table wines usually they ferment for 2 weeks, and the sugar of the grape turns into alcohol. And they are all soft compared with port wines, because usually a table wine has always between 12 to 14% of alcohol, and they are wines you can drink with meals, with food. Port wine only ferments mostly for 4 or 5 days. And that's the difference. We stop the fermentation sooner, so all of the wines are sweet because there's more sugar of the grape. And to stop the fermentation sooner, there's the fortification, which is basically the moment when we add the alcohol to the port wine. This type of alcohol, it's not even drinkable, because in Portuguese we call aguardente. A lot of people call it brandy, but aguardente, it is not a brandy. It is basically a grape spirit produced with the same grapes that we use for the port wine, and this spirit has exactly 77% of alcohol. So as I said, it's not even drinkable, just the spirit that we use to fortify the wine. A lot of port wines, they have around 19 to 20% of alcohol, so they are not even wines to drink with meals. You just drink as an appetizer or as a digestive. And that's the difference. So it depends exactly how long they all ferment, because when the port wine ferments less, there's more even sugar of the grape. So then you have even sweeter wines compared with the others. After all the production there, which is transport all the wine here, then all the things that we do here in the cellar, it's the aging of the port wine. Here you will see a lot of vats and barrels, because everything that you will see here, it was all built by hand. For example, you have a small vat. These are large, but the largest of all, they are just on the other side of the cellar. And before I explain all the different varieties of wines that we have here, so because they were all built by hand, just to build a single vat like this, it takes 2 weeks or 14 days. But also we need a group of 8 coopers, 8 people just to build one vat, a single vat like this. The type of wood that we use mostly for the port wine production, it's oak. We have 3 different types: Portuguese, French, and American oak. And we use oak because it's waterproof, but it's also a type of wood that we can use for a very long time. Because big vats like this, the big ones, usually we use them for 120 years maximum. And at the end they are destroyed, or it depends on the quality of the wood, because some vats, if they are not used for the wine, they can be used as decoration. because you have a vineyard in the Douro Valley, they have a specific hotel which some of the rooms are just inside of a vat like this. But also we have the small barrels. Small barrels, usually we use them around 80, 90 years, but after 90 years maximum, some of the barrels, we can even sell them to other productions like the whiskey in Scotland. Because the wood has already the flavor of the wine, but all the barrels inside, they are just toasted to give the extra flavor to the whiskey, the smoky flavor. But not only, we can use all of them for a very long time, and actually our oldest vat in the cellar, it was built in 1917, 106 years ago. But also, they are so big that actually, as I said, we can build rooms inside of vats, or even some vats are big enough to put a Mini Cooper inside. In capacity, most of the vats here in this part of the cellar, they have around 50, 60,000 liters. Do you have any idea how many bottles we can bottle just with a single vat like this? Just one vat. So basically, it's an average of 74,000 bottles each vat. Vats like this, because as I said, in the other side, there's also larger vats. But then, here in this cellar, we produce 4 different types of port wines. 4. There's the white, the ruby, the tawny, and the rosé. Whites and rosé, they are not being produced here. The only wines that we have here are the classic, the reds, ruby and tawny. They are all produced with the same red grape, but the biggest difference is just the aging. Because ruby only age in the big vats. So the vats are all large, they are full inside, and the wine don't have any oxygen. And the color of the ruby, just like a red table wine color. And that's why the name ruby, because they actually have a ruby color. But all the ruby wines, compared with tawnies, they are just young port wines, because they all age maximum 6 years in vats. There is only a single ruby that can age longer than the others. It's the vintage. But the vintage doesn't age longer in the vats, it's longer in the bottles. It's the only port wine that can keep longer at home. Because usually a port wine bottle, without open, you can keep it for 5, 6 years. But the vintage you can keep it for 60 years. Then also, because they are the only ones that only ages in the big vats, inside of each vat there's always more wine than wood, and the wine just preserves the fruity flavor of the grape. So in flavor, they are always the same, like a red table wine flavor. So they are liquor because they have alcohol, but in flavor they are just like fruity. The tawnies are different because the first years of the tawny port wine, they age like a ruby because they are all produced from the same grapes. After some years, we pass the wine to the small barrels. In the small barrels, they are never completely full. So the wine has a little bit of oxygen, and the color, it's lighter. But also, you can see the difference not only by the color, but by the aroma, because then the tawnies are older wines, and then it depends exactly how long they all age in the barrel. Because the barrels, they have exactly this strong flavor of the wood, and that's it. The longer they age, the stronger they are, but not strong in alcohol, strong in aroma. Because in alcohol, they have both 20%. So the main difference, it's the color, but also the aroma. Especially the ones that we have there. They are single harvest productions. Colheita, the word that you can see right over there, it means in Portuguese harvest. So these are single harvest, but this is actually our harvest from this cellar, because every cellar that you visit, there's always different varieties, there's also different productions. And our oldest wine that we have here aging, they all have minimum 10 years, but maximum they don't have it. Our oldest one, it's right over there, it's from the single harvest in 1958. The oldest wine at the moment here in the cellar, because we have 5 different cellars. They all have very different years. Our oldest one, it's from Kopke. It's the single harvest from 1934. So some tawnies are actually old, they can even age over 100 years. It depends how long they all age, that's it. We're also in the north of Portugal, and because of if you compare north to the south, here in the north it's very rainy, especially in the winter. Especially here in the city, we're just by the river, and we already had a lot of problems with some floods in the city. Some of the floods, they were also inside of the cellar, and you will see all the years of the floods. The last one was in 1989. As the flood increased, the years recede, and the worst of all the floods, it was in 1909, when we had exactly 3 meters of water in the cellar. But all the floods that we had, they were not a big problem to the wine production, because, as I told you, the type of wood, it's oak and it's waterproof. But also, in the case of the big vats, they are all full of wine and they didn't move, they just stay still. The small barrels are never completely full of wine, but in the water, they just floated. So we didn't lose any type of port wine that we had. It had a purpose because nowadays to transport port wine, we use stainless steel trucks. But some years ago, we used the boats. And when we used the boats, when the boat drowned, the barrels never drowned. So yeah, it had a purpose. All the boats that you can see now outside, they are not being used. They are just in the river for exhibition. Then, every cellar, every vat here in the cellar, they are all raised to avoid the moisture, and our floor is just slightly clean. So after a flood, the water just go back to the river faster. Then let's just continue the tour. In the other side, I'm just going to explain all the different varieties, because I already explained the difference between ruby and tawny, but there's even more varieties than this. Ooh, I didn't told you, but all of the barrels, because they are not exactly full of wine, there's always the evaporation because the wine evaporates. They call this also in Scotland for the whiskey the angel share. We have it, but every single year we lose 3% of wine because of the evaporation. So a very old wine has, for example, 58s. Then at the end, we might have only just a few bottles, not a lot of bottles like the other wines. But as I said, so our oldest one aging here is from 58. Our oldest one in our store in the bottle is 61. So some wines are still aging. Then later we can bottle the wine, and the wine will be just in a higher price, but also stronger flavor because it ages longer. But we have 4 different types. As I said, we have the whites, the ruby, the tawny, and the rosé. You can see the difference between the color, as I told you. The ruby just like the red of the wine, the tawny lighter, but then the tawny is stronger in aroma, the ruby it's mostly like a fruity flavor. But I'm going to start with the white and the rosé because they are the most recent productions. We start the white production in the 90s. We start also the rosé production in 2013. And both of them are not only wines that most people drink as an appetizer, but you can now use port wine to do other types of beverage, other cocktails, for example. There's a lot of them here in the city, but the most famous one, it is just like a gin tonic, but instead of gin, it's port wine, so we call it Porto tonic. There's a lot of them. You can do sangria made of port wine as well. So I'm just going to start with the white because they are usually the youngest of all. They all age exactly around 3-4 years, and we have the first one, the white and dry. It doesn't exist a dry port wine. So basically, this is not exactly a dry wine, it's just the last sweet port wine that we have, because it only ages in stainless steel. It has just a pale color, like a champagne color, but the flavor of the wine is just similar to the Italian beverage, for example, of Prosecco. The magic of wine. Do you feel the aroma? Like a lot of people when they enter here, they say, "Oh, I feel the aroma," but I don't feel anything because I cannot live in here, so I cannot feel anything. Probably that's why at the end of the day, I'm not even Portuguese I speak. So then, this is just a wine with a very similar flavor, as I said, Prosecco, not a sparkling wine, but the flavor is actually very similar. And in sugar, it has a total of 48 grams of sugar per liter. So it's not exactly a dry wine, it is just the last sweet port wine that we have compared with the others. Because some cellars they produce extra dry port wine, but even an extra dry port wine, it is not a dry port wine in total. So it doesn't exist any dry port wine. Then you have the fine wine. This is already a sweet port wine because it also ages for 3-4 years, but it's one part stainless steel, another part in the wood. Because we're aging in the wood, the color is also darker because it has a yellow golden color, but the flavor is just stronger and fruity, similar to tropical fruits. In sugar, it's almost the double or the triple of the white and dry, because it's a wine with 106 grams of sugar per liter. It's sweet, but it's not the sweetest. Because the sweetest of all, it is the one that we call in Portuguese lágrima. Lágrima port wine, it is an extra sweet port wine because to produce a sweeter port wine, as I said on the other side, it depends exactly how long they all age, because how long they all ferment. Because when the port wine ferment less, there's more sugar of the grape, so the wine will be sweeter. But also, it ages like 3-4 years only in wood, and the flavor of the wine is just similar to honey. The color, it's the darkest color of all the white wine colors, And also in sugar, it's 152, so there's no sweeter port wine than this one. And we call it lágrima because in Portuguese it means tear. When you have a glass of port wine, doesn't matter which type of port wine it is because they're all sweet. If you swirl the glass, you can see they all have legs and tears. But when the port wine is even sweeter, it's even thicker. And then you can see they have even more legs, even more tears. That's why I named tears, because it's actually the sweetest, the thickest of all the port wines. All of them are fresh temperature port wines, so you have always to keep the white wine bottles in the fridge. Once you open, to drink a white port wine, it's half a year, 6 months. And also, white port wine nowadays you can use as an appetizer, as a dessert, or even as a cocktail. Then you have a rosé. Some people believe that the production of this wine it's a blend of white and red, but it's not. It's just a red wine. The difference is in the middle of the fermentation, we remove the skin out of the grape, and that's why the lighter color. Because it doesn't have a lot of tannins compared with the other red wines, but also it's red, but the production is similar to a white because it only ages in stainless steel. It has 3-4 years like the other white wines, but also it is a wine with fresh temperatures, always in the fridge, and it has some flavors of cherry and raspberry. So it's a very sweet port wine. In sugar, it's almost like fine wines, the same amount of sugar, 103 grams. And it is not a wine that every cellar produces, so rosé, it's only produced at the moment in 3 cellars. And this is mostly a wine for cocktails. More than the others, this is actually a cocktail wine. So this wine came basically to change the consumption of the port wine. But then we have the classic, the ruby. Fine ruby, it is a regular production. When you have a wine with the name fine, they always age for 3-4 years, so they are just the standards. Then we have the vintage. Vintage port wines are usually the wines that we don't produce every year because they are only from the most exceptional years. The first one, it's a late bottle vintage. Basically, by the name, you can see that this wine is just a vintage, but it ages longer in the wood. It has a total of 6 years in vats, but after 6 years in the bottle, they already filtered because they don't age anymore in the bottle. So they only have 6 years in vats. The flavor is just like a red table wine, some sweeter flavors as well with plum and dark chocolates. And because they are the ones similar to the red table wines, the rubies usually are the ones that always oxidize faster because maximum to drink a vintage, an LBV, it's 3 months. So they oxidize faster than the white and faster than the tawny. But even more than the others, it's the vintage. This is actually the best quality port wine of all. The first 3 years, they age in the vats. After 3 years maximum, they all go straight to the bottle. They are not filtered, they have sediments, and because of the sediments, they are the ones that still age longer in the bottle. You can keep a bottle, as I said in the other side, 60 years. But if you want to keep the wine longer, you have always to keep the bottles laid down because of the cork. If the cork dry, the oxygen will pass through the bottle and the wine will spoil too fast. And that's why it's a particular port wine, because we don't produce vintage every year. You can keep a bottle way longer compared with the others. But once you open, only 3 days maximum to drink it. So it's just a wine for special occasions, not for every day. For example, we have a tradition in Portugal, when a couple has a baby, if the baby is born in the vintage year, you just buy a bottle, you keep the bottle until the 18 years old, once the baby is already an adult, you just open the bottle. A wine for weddings, divorces, and all. Just special occasion, not every day, but more than the others, it's this one, the tawny, the most traditional of all. Because the port wine is a typical thing here in Portugal, yes, but it's not a wine that we drink every day because most people in Portugal, they actually use port wine for Christmas. Like a glass of tawny after the Christmas dinner as a digestive, or even you can use the port wine to do their own Christmas sweets. So it's mostly a wine for Christmas. This one is easy because this one is just like Mariah Carey, only at Christmas. That's it. So we have 10, 20, 30, 40, and 40. So they are all the average year port wines because they never age all the years that you see. For example, at 10, we have to do always a blend of old wine with 12 and another younger wine of 8. The blending of these two types, younger with older, there's always an average year of 10. 20, 30, and 40 will be always the same. So we just blend different wines with different years, and all blended, we have a different quality port wine, but the main point here is to change the flavor of the wine. So every cellar produces type of port wine. And if you compare our 10 with another 10, some wines, they might be different because there's different ways to blend all the wines. But then there's also a special reserve. It is just a wine with 7 years in total. It has 2 in the big vats, 5 in the small barrels. Flavors are just like cognac. It's not the oldest tawny of all, but even a 7 years old tawny compared with any other ruby is already a strong wine in flavor. Because to the quality of the port wine, you have always the standards, the fine, the reserve, 10, 20, 30, and the single harvest, the top quality. Then you have the fine tawny, the standard. You can use the standard wines usually to cook. Have you ever tasted the sandwich that we have here in the city called francesinha? It's like a sandwich full of meat, sausage, fried egg, cheese, and sauce. The sauce of the dish is made of different beverages because the sauce, it has beer, it has whiskey, but also has port wine. And then you have the single harvest. As I said, they all have minimum 10 years, it's just minimum in the barrel. They don't have maximum. For example, if you have a single harvest from 2,000 bottles this year, the flavor will be very strong because the wine already aged for 23 years in wood. But if you have the same year port wine, just bottled 20 years later, the flavor will be stronger because the wine will be older. So, as I said, the longer they age, the stronger they will be. And if you have the same year port wine, but if they are all bottled at different times, they will never be the same. The only way to know how long they all age is just if you check in the label of the bottle, the year of the harvest and the year of the bottling. It's the only way to know how long they all age because they all have very different years, even if they are from the same harvest. So once you open the tawny, it's 1 year to drink, 1 year for all of them. And that's it. So before, after, never with mills, white and rose appetizers, cocktails. Ruby pairs very well with cheese. Tawny pairs very well with chocolates. So yeah, a wine to do whatever you want, not exactly to drink with milk. So come on in, because you can take photos, it's fine. But this is actually the biggest vat that we have in the cellar. The other ones, they have around 74,000 bottles capacity. This one, 100,000 bottles. And right over here, you have the oldest vat in the cellar. This is the oldest one because it was built in 1917. As I said, it was built 106 years ago. The quality of the wood is not the best one. You have also wine leaking. We have wine on the floor, but we can still use the vat just for a little bit longer because you can see the vat is almost full. And usually we use the oldest vats for the very recent productions because over there we have a single harvest from 2020. Sell it together. Most of it is port wine because we have around 8 million bottles for the port wine, 2 million bottles for the table wines. And as I said, all the port wine production it's in the Douro Valley because there's similar productions out of Portugal, for example Australia or South Africa. But because the wines are not produced there, they cannot be officialized as a port wine. So it's just like a champagne. Champagnes are only produced in Champagne, so it's the same for the port wine. Only in the Douro Valley, and also 10 million bottles is not the biggest production because there's other sellers producing more than us, but it's already the same amount of population that we have altogether in the country in Portugal. And yeah, so 10 million bottles nowadays because we don't drink port wine every day. It is mostly bottles to export because we have around 60% of exportation. We can export all over the country. Especially here because this cellar here, it's not an international cellar, it's a national brand. So we have other companies that are even more international than us. For example, the Kopke, it's the most international, all around Europe. They can export to all the countries in Europe. So we're just going to the best part, the tasting. You can use the stairs or the elevator. Then upstairs, I just need to see your tickets because you all have different tastings.